The message burned across every channel, its seal shimmering with alien authority, a fractal sigil of dominance known throughout the galaxy. To the Terran Empire, the voice declared, each syllable carrying the cold resonance of 1,000 translators, you are hereby ordered to surrender your fleets, dismantle your war industries, and submit to Council stewardship within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in your extinction. This is not a negotiation. Admiral Kalen Voss stood in the command hall of the Terran Strategic Corps, the holographic projection dissolving the air like fading smoke. Around him, the war room remained silent. Commanders and analysts exchanged tense glances but spoke no words. They all felt the same thing, the weight of an ultimatum dressed as a verdict. He clasped his hands behind his back, his expression carved from stone. "Time-stamp it," he ordered. "Archive the full transmission. Encrypt and forward it to all fleet admirals, level Crimson." A comms officer hesitated. "Admiral, shall we draft an official response?" Voss's gray eyes shifted toward her. "Not yet." The Council had finally revealed their hand, or rather, their chain. For decades, they had sent envoys, issued trade sanctions, meddled in Terran affairs under the guise of galactic stability. Now they demanded obedience. But beneath their polished decree, Voss read the true message: fear. The heliosector star map glowed before him, displaying the strategic choke points that separated Terran space from Council-held regions. He studied the routes with a tactician's precision. Their fleets were scattered. Their unity, he suspected, was as fragile as the treaties that bound them. "Summon the High Command," Voss said. "We convene in 10. Minutes later, the Council table was filled with hard faces and restless minds. Generals, admirals, intelligence directors, each represented a facet of the Terran machine. The air carried the weight of history, scars from centuries of external interference and hard-won independence. Fleet Marshal Ronadre spoke first, her voice sharp as steel. "We can't fight the full Council head-on. Their combined fleets outnumber ours 5-1. Compliance buys time. We yield a little, rebuild in shadow, then strike." Voss regarded her steadily. "Compliance sets a precedent. Once we kneel, we never stand again." Director of Intelligence Merrick Thorne tapped the data slate, projecting intercepted chatter. "They've overextended. Riots in the Nera clusters. Insurgency in 3 outer sectors. Their ultimatum is a gamble. They expect us to bow without a shot fired. And if we don't?" asked Minister Elira Jevin, the civilian liaison. Her tone carried unease, but also a spark of resolve. "What are the stakes?" Voss leaned forward. "Extinction or worse. Subjugation. They call it stewardship. We know it as servitude." A murmur swept the table. The Terran Empire had risen from an age of ashes, clawing its way to parity among the stars. To yield now would undo generations of sacrifice. "We don't have the luxury of a long war," said Drace. "If we resist, it must be swift, decisive, and unconventional." Voss allowed the ghost of a smile. "Exactly." Later, alone in his private office, he replayed the ultimatum once more. The alien envoy's features, avian, severe, crowned with ceremonial gold, glared at him from projection. It was meant to intimidate. It had the opposite effect. He keyed in a command on a secure console. Lines of encrypted orders flared, transmitted through shadow channels to assets already in motion. The operation had been conceived long before the ultimatum was spoken, waiting for a trigger. Now it had one. Operation Black Dawn. Initiate. The first wave was not a fleet, but a whisper. Covert strike teams, stealth cruisers, and Black Ops couriers dispersing to the Helios sector like dark seeds. Their mission: disrupt, sabotage, bleed the Council quietly. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. It was the Emperor, not as a ruler issuing commands, but as the one man Voss had sworn to protect. His voice carried the calm of a leader who had survived 3 wars. "You've heard the message." "Yes, sire," Voss replied. "It was not unexpected." "Nor your reaction," the Emperor said. "Tell me plainly, Kalen, can we survive this?" Voss considered the question not as a soldier, but as a student of history. "If we fight their war, no. If we fight ours, they will not recover." A pause and a faint exhale. "Do what must be done." The channel closed. That night, the Terran homeworlds burned with activity beneath quiet skies. Military yards operated under blackout protocols. Civilians continued their lives unaware that history had shifted. News anchors spoke attentions, a council arrogance, but no open war. Not yet. At the edges of known space, 12 Terran stealth cruisers slipped into dark hyperspace lanes, their drives humming like distant thunder. No fanfare, no declarations. Just the quiet star of a conflict the Council thought they would dictate. Back in the war room, Voss met again with his closest aides. "They believe we are cornered," he said, eyes fixed on the star map. "They've mistaken our silence for hesitation." Thorne smirked faintly. "So what will they mistake our first blow for?" "An act of defiance," Voss replied. "One they will not expect, and cannot answer cleanly." Drace leaned in, her fingers tracing the Helios routes. "You mean to cut their arteries before the heart can rally?" Voss gave a single nod. "Precisely." The countdown to the Council's 72-hour deadline began. Across alien capitals, their media broadcast triumphant predictions of Terran submission. Yet in the shadow of their overconfidence, quiet chaos was already unfolding. Supply convoys vanished. Forward listening posts reported phantom contacts, then went dark. Admiral Voss stood once more before the fading projection of the ultimatum, its words etched in his memory. He knew what the Council did not. Humanity had learned from every chain, every occupation, every betrayal. They had forged their empire not in conquest, but in endurance. This war, if it came, would not be about territory. It would be about memory, the galaxy's memory of a species that refused to kneel. And as the first Terran operatives reached their targets, Kalen Voss allowed himself a single, whispered sentence, meant for no ears but his own. "Let them come. They've already lost." The void of the Helios sector shimmered with distant suns, cold and indifferent to the unfolding tension. In that darkness, Terran stealth cruisers moved like predators, silent, invisible, and already at work. Admiral Kalen Voss monitored the reports from the central war room. The map was alive with shifting markers. Convoys rerouting, council patrols sweeping, unknown signatures flickering in and out. The first phase of Operation Black Dawn had begun to ripple. "Update," he ordered, his voice cutting to the low murmur. A young officer leaned forward. "Alpha 3 has intercepted a logistics convoy near Sarin Passage. Cargo neutralized, crews evacuated. No survivors left to trace." "Good," Voss replied. "No wreckage, no trails, just absence." On the opposite side of the sector, the Galactic Council's high spire burned with activity. High Chancellor Zyrak Trell stood before a semicircular table of delegates, each representing a species, with its own banners and ambitions. His feathers were drawn tight in irritation. "They delay their response," said a reptilian delegate, his tongue flicking with disdain. "This hesitation is a sign of weakness, or of calculation," countered a pale, tentacled elder. "Humans have a history of biding their time before they strike." Zyrak silenced them with a raised claw. "Their history is irrelevant. Their position is untenable. They will submit or they will break." A comms officer hurried in, presenting a holopad. "Chancellor, reports of 3 missing supply caravans en route to the nearest front. No debris fields. No distress calls." Murmurs rose. The avian leader's golden eyes narrowed. "Pirates?" "No," said the officer quietly. "Too precise. Too coordinated." Back in Terran command, Director Merrick Thorne approached Voss with secure transmission. "Intercepted council chatter," he said, placing projection on the table. Voices of alien dialects echoed faintly. Confusion, not yet panic. "They suspect nothing?" Voss asked. "They suspect everything," Thorne replied with a wry smile. "And that's the problem for them. Too many enemies, too many fault lines. Our fingerprints? None." Fleet Marshal Rana Drace entered, her expression sharpened by sleepless hours. "Our colonies on the fringe are asking for reassurance. They've seen the ultimatum. They expect war. They'll have to wait for reassurance," Voss said. "What they need is results." 2 days into the 72-hour window, Terran shadow teams had already planted the first seeds of instability. Hyperlane relays jammed. Mining consortiums loyal to the Council found their machinery crippled by inexplicable malfunctions. And yet, no declaration of war had been issued. No fleets had clashed openly. At dawn's cycle, a transmission blinked to life in the Terran chamber, a message routed from the Council itself. Zyrak Trell appeared, feathers pristine, voice cold but strained. Terran Empire, you have not yet answered. Our patience wears thin. Do not mistake silence for mercy. Voss allowed the message to finish, then gestured it away. Drace folded her arms. They want a reaction. They'll have one, Voss replied, but not the one they expect. That night, a covert Terran envoy met with a minor council representative in a dim-lit orbital station far from any capital. The envoy, face concealed beneath a neutral mask, slid a data chip across the table. These are shipping manifests, the alien whispered, his translucent skin pulsing with unease. Smuggled routes, lightly defended, if this is traced. It won't be, the envoy said. And when this is over, your world will not be among the ruins. The alien hesitated, then nodded. The deal was struck. At the war table, Kalen Voss reviewed the updated star map. They're shifting fleets from the Nera clusters. Thorne said, tracing the movement with a gloved finger, pulling strength to the central lanes. Exactly where we want them, Voss murmured. Drace leaned over. If they mass their fleet here, they expose their southern corridor. And that, Voss said, tapping a faintly marked system, is where our next move begins. Meanwhile, alien news channels broadcast confident rhetoric. Council anchors mocked Terran stubbornness. Diplomats spoke of swift compliance and inevitable integration. Behind their polished declarations, supply delays mounted, communications faltered, and border outposts reported go signals, then went silent. In one intercepted recording, a council officer hissed in frustration. It's like they're everywhere and nowhere. We can't fight shadows. On the final night before the ultimatum's deadline, Kalen Voss stood at the viewport of the strategic core. Earth's blue crescent hung in the distance, serene against the black. He spoke softly, as if to himself. They believe this is about their dominance. It's about our memory. Merrick Thorne joined him, holding a seal file. Operation Black Dawn Phase 2 is ready. Saboteurs are in position. Sleeper cells have activated in 3 council sectors. Voss nodded. Good. When the deadline strikes, we let them make the first roar. Will be the silence that follows. Across the Helios void, the embers of defiance spread. Invisible but relentless. Council patrols move with growing haste, still believing the Terran Empire to be on the defensive, still convinced they were tightening a leash. But Kalen Voss knew the truth. The leash was already snapping. The council hall of the High Spire was never built for war. Its vaulted chamber, layered in crystalline arches, had for centuries been a theater of compromise. Today, compromise was nowhere to be found. High Chancellor Zyrak Trell stood before a circle of restless delegates, each flanked by aides whispering in hushed tones. The air trembled with argument. The Terrans ignore our ultimatum, barked a broad-shouldered Threxian warlord, his mandibles clattering with frustration. Strike now. Burn their colonies, seize their routes. They sabotage our convoys already, countered an elder with translucent tendrils draped over her shoulders. You would risk a war without full unity? Madness. Zyrak raised a claw for silence. His feathers caught the light like sharpened gold. Enough. They delay because they fear us. A coordinated strike will break their will. A soft laugh echoed from the far side of the chamber. It belonged to the CRE delegate, a slender figure with violet skin and 4 luminous eyes. Fear, she said, or patience. Have you considered they are not waiting to surrender, Chancellor, but waiting to choose where cut first? Murmurs rippled. The statement was bold, and more importantly, it was true. Already the Council's outer sectors groaned under subtle chaos. Empty convoys, disrupted relays, whispers of Terran agents sowing unrest. Far from the spire, aboard a dim-lit observation deck orbiting Vero's Gate, Kalen Voss read the intercepted transcripts in silence. Each council dispute fed the fissures he had anticipated. The Helios sector map shimmered before him, glowing faintly in the darkness. Merrick Thorne approached, carrying a fresh dossier. Reports from the defecting envoy, he said. They provided transit schedules, high-level communication nodes, even a list of council factions wavering in their loyalty. Names? Voss asked. Thorne flicked his wrist, and a line of sigils appeared. The Veari Syndicate will not intervene directly. Too much trade at stake. The Aero Assembly argues for negotiation. They see profit in a stalemate. The rest, he shrugged, divided. Voss studied the list with cold satisfaction. Division was an ally he did not need to cultivate. It was already blooming. On the council floor, Zyrak Trell convened a closed meeting with his war council. Gone were the ceremonial phrases and polished declarations. This was a room of steel and calculation. Deploy the peacekeeping fleet, the Chancellor ordered. Target the Terran border colony at Row 17. We cripple one, the others will bend. An aide hesitated. Chancellor, the peacekeeping fleet is a coalition force. We require unanimous vote for such action. Then manufacture one, Zyrak snapped. Leak intelligence of Terran troop movements. Paint them as aggressors. I want that fleet in motion before the next cycle. Back in Terran command, the briefing room filled with subdued light as holograms flickered alive. Fleet Marshal Drace's voice cut through the hum. They're moving a coalition fleet toward Row 17. 30 hours until it reaches a colony. Voss traced the route with his eyes. Expected. They chose the softest target. They believe it undefended, Thorne added, and they're not entirely wrong. A silence settled over the table. Then Voss spoke. We will not reinforce Row 17. Drace turned sharply. You would leave it exposed? I would leave it bait, he replied. Every fleet they move, there is one they cannot shift elsewhere. The game is not to save every world, but to make them question each step. In the shadow lanes, Terran saboteurs struck again. A hyperlane relay collapsed in a controlled implosion, isolating 2 council task forces. No declaration of war followed, only the quiet erasure of another link in their chain. Council broadcasts began to shift in tone. Words like swift victory gave way to necessary measures. Internal leaks, carefully planted by Thorne's operatives, fueled suspicion between member states. In one transmission intercepted that night, a weary alien envoy muttered, The humans do not shout. They whisper and our walls crack. The third day of the ultimatum neared its end. On Earth, the news still spoke of tense negotiations, but in the deep halls of Terran Command, Kalen Voss prepared the next move. They expect submission, he said to his inner circle. Instead, we give them dissonance. How? Drace asked. By letting their coalition become a burden. Each delay, each failure will weigh heavier than any battle we fight. At the council, the cracks widened. Delegates traded accusations. Failed intelligence, traitorous whispers, unexplained losses. Some demanded immediate war. Others threatened to withdraw their fleets altogether. Zyrak Trell addressed them with forced calm. This is a test of resolve. Humanity cannot face our full strength. If you falter now, you invite rebellion across every border. The CRE delegate's eyes gleamed. Perhaps rebellion has already begun. Perhaps the Terrans merely lit the first spark. Hours before the ultimatum expired, a secure channel carried a brief message from Kalen Voss to the Emperor. Council unity fractured. Row 17 will fall, but not break us. Phase 3 ready upon your word. The Emperor's reply was a single sentence. Let them exhaust themselves. In the void, the coalition fleet pressed on, unaware that every jump brought them deeper into a web laid long before their ultimatum was issued. The peacekeeping fleet arrived at Row 17 under a fractured dawn. Its formation spread wide across the colony's pale orbit. 48 ships of mixed origin, Threxian warcruisers, Ciari command frigates, 2 Veari carriers, a force built to intimidate, not to maneuver. They expected a compliant world, unarmed and resigned. Instead, they found silence. No welcoming broadcast, no distress signal. Only the faint hum of planetary shields on standby and an empty trade station hanging motionless. Commander Auric, the fleet's acting overseer, issued the order. Sweep the system. Secure the relay hub. We want their surrender recorded before the Chancellor calls for blood. Across the Helios sector, aboard the Terran flagship Iron Resolve, Kalen Voss received the incoming data. Row 17 had been cleared of sensitive assets 3 days earlier. The colonists evacuated quietly under false routine, leaving only automated responses and dormant defense nodes. Rana Drace studied the feed beside him. They took the bait. Good, Voss said. Now we cut their voice. Merrick Thorne approached with a slim data drive. Phase 3 authorization codes, Admiral. The window is narrow. We may not get another chance. High Chancellor Zyrak Trell was not at row 17. He remained in the high spire, surrounded by advisors whose patience had thinned to the threadbare edge. His heir, Counselor Varric Trell, had taken command of the expedition to oversee compliance. Young, ambitious, eager to prove the Council's strength. Precisely the target Voss had chosen. From a concealed platform hidden in the debris field near row 17, a Terran stealth corvette powered up its cold fusion array. Within its hull, a single operative checked the device again. A micro-drone swarm packed in a crate no larger than a courier chest. It carried no explosive warhead, no traditional payload. Its weapon was data, a self-propagating lattice designed to infiltrate and rewrite the fleet's command chain. Signal on my mark, the operative whispered. The fleet at row 17 prepared to transmit its first broadcast of dominance when the micro-drones dispersed, invisible against the starlight. They latched onto hulls, crept through maintenance vents, and reached the flagship's core systems in silence. Then the cascade began. One by one, communications relays blinked out. Targeting arrays recalibrated to phantom contacts. Navigation relays rebooted mid-cycle. To the crews aboard, it was confusion, a tangle of malfunctions. To the command deck, it was an ambush without a single shot fired. Counselor Varric Trell's image flared in the high spire, grainy and strained. Systems failing across half the fleet. Unknown interference. His voice cut to static. Zyrak stiffened. Is this the Terran response? Sabotage. The Ciari delegate tilted her head, her eyes gleaming. You wanted proof of their reach. Now you have it. On Iron Resolve, the readout scrolled with cascading green. Thorne exhaled slowly. Command tree overwritten. Counselor's flagship isolated. Drace glanced at Voss. You intend to kill him now? No, Voss said. We will let them believe it was their own doing. In the flagship's sealed chamber, Varric Trell pounded the console as alarms rippled through the corridors. His guards reported system lockdowns, airlocks cycling at random, crew dispersing into chaos. Then the lights dimmed and the micro-drones delivered their final function. A precision surge in the environmental controls of his private deck. The report to the Council hours later was brief. Life support failure. Flagship lost with all hands. Back in the Council hall, outrage erupted. The Threxian warlord slammed his clawed fist on the table. They assassinated him. They never fired a weapon, countered the Ciari. Your nephew brought an overconfident fleet to a silent world, and it died in its own shadow. Zyrak's feathers bristled. He had demanded a show of strength. He had lost an heir and a third of a fleet. I will not be lectured by scavengers. This is war. War you cannot win in pieces, murmured the tentacled elder. You forget, Chancellor, each blow you swing only deepens the cracks. Voss received the transmission of Varric's demise without a flicker of satisfaction. It was not celebration he sought, but position. Open channels, he told Drace. Broadcast the following message across the border sectors. His voice, calm and unhurried, went out on coded beams. The Terran Empire does not seek war, but will answer force with consequence. Withdraw your fleets or lose them to silence. Council media spun the incident as a tragic malfunction, but whispers told a different story. The humans had struck without firing a single cannon, and a Council heir had perished in his own flagship. Merchants rerouted their vessels away from conflict zones. Minor states began to reconsider their alliances. The ultimatum, once a threat carved in iron, now looked like the first crack in a collapsing wall. Late that night, Kale and Voss stood alone in the observation deck, the stars cold and endless beyond the glass. Drace approached, silent for a moment before speaking. "You think this will break them?" "No," Voss said. "It will make them reckless. And that's what you want. That's what we need. A unified council would crush us by weight. A desperate one will tear itself apart trying to find our shape." Across the Helio sector, council fleets shifted uneasily, their commanders wary of ghosts. Hyperlane beacons whispered false readings. Colonies transmitted rehearsed compliance. And in the deep, Terran agents moved from shadow to shadow. The silent execution had not ended the war. It had only redrawn its first line. The Council's Great Hall was not the same chamber that had delivered the ultimatum. Its arches still gleamed, banners still hung, but the atmosphere had changed. Whispers lingered like smoke after a failed ritual. Delegates avoided each other's eyes. Trust had drained to the floor like water through a crack. High Chancellor Zyrak Trell sat at the center throne, his feathers dulled by sleepless days. The death of his heir had rattled him, though he would never say it aloud. Fleets were repositioning, trade lanes flickering in and out of control. Allies demanded answers he did not have. The chamber doors opened. A Terran delegation stepped inside, led by Admiral Kalen Voss. No honor guards, no ceremonial entourage. Only a handful of aides and the calm weight of his presence. He wore no weapons, only the dark uniform of his office. Silence followed him like a shadow. Zyrak spoke first, his voice sharp. "You arrive uninvited, Admiral." "You invited us," Voss replied evenly, "when you demanded our submission." The hall stirred. Some delegates leaned forward, curious. Others recoiled as though the Terran's very presence was provocation. Zyrak gestured toward the central platform. "Speak, then. Explain why your fleet sabotage our corridors, why your agents murder my bloodline." Voss met his gaze without flinching. "We answered your ultimatum. You threatened our extinction. We chose survival." The Ciari delegate, ever watching, interjected softly. "Chancellor, he stands here unarmed. That is not the posture of a conqueror, nor of a servant," hissed the Threxian warlord. Voss's voice cut through their exchange. "You sent a fleet to Row 17. You called it peacekeeping. Its commander enforced your will with a noose. We removed the noose. The method was clean, the message deliberate. Zyrak's claws curled on the armrest. And your message? That the age of ultimata has ended." Voss said, "You mistook our silence for weakness. It was preparation." A murmur rose around the hall, not outrage, but calculation. Delegates weighed their losses, their unrest, their fraying alliances. The Council's authority had been challenged without a formal war, and they had bled in the void. The tentacled elder leaned forward. "What do you propose, Admiral? That we forget the ultimatum?" "No," Voss replied. "That you rewrite it." Behind the comm, Terran fleets had already repositioned. Covert strikes had dismantled 2 key supply hubs. 3 neutral powers had declared non-alignment, citing security concerns. The Council was not yet defeated, but it was no longer certain of its ground. Zyrak rose, feathers bristling. "You believe this is victory?" "This is equilibrium," Voss said. "Victory is what follows when we are forced to burn everything you built. We prefer to avoid that." The exchange that followed was less a negotiation than a recalibration. The Council, for all its posturing, needed stability. Its member states were merchants and administrators as much as soldiers. War drained profit. Chaos bred rebellion. The Ciari delegate turned to the Chancellor. "Withdraw the fleets. Suspend the ultimatum. Let them hold their borders." Zyrak's beak snapped shut. He saw the shift. The room was slipping beyond his control. To press further would risk fracture beyond repair. After hours of veiled arguments and careful concessions, the resolution was set. The ultimatum was rescinded under the pretext of ongoing security review. Terran sovereignty was neither endorsed nor condemned, a deliberate ambiguity that allowed both sides to claim posture without open conflict. As the session closed, Zyrak addressed Voss one last time. You have won a pause, not a peace. Voss inclined his head slightly. Pauses can last lifetimes, Chancellor. Long enough for memories to harden. Outside the hall, the Terran delegation walked in measured silence toward their waiting shuttle. One aide exhaled sharply. We expected them to push harder. They will, Voss said. Not today. Today they lick their wounds. Rana Drace, waiting at the shuttle's ramp, allowed herself the faintest smile. The Empire will call this a victory. Call it what it is, Voss replied. A reminder. On the journey back through heliospace, Terran channels brimmed with coded reports. Colony secure. Fleets on alert. Sabotage networks now dormant but ready. There had been no grand battle, no declaration carved into the stars. Only a lesson, delivered with silence and precision. At the Emperor's private hall, Voss delivered his report in person. The Emperor listened without interruption, his fingers steepled beneath a curtain of starlight. They came for submission, Voss concluded. They leave with caution. And the price? The Emperor asked. Minimal, Voss said, but never free. That night, as the Terran homeworlds rotated beneath their suns, Kalen Voss stood alone at the observatory deck of the Iron Resolve. The galaxy stretched before him, fractured, restless, but no longer certain of Terran fragility. Rana Drace's voice came through the comm, standing orders. Voss watched the stars a moment longer. Hold the lines. Strengthen the hidden hand. Let them wonder where the next silence will fall. In the years to follow, historians would argue when the war truly began, or if it ever did. Some would point to the ultimatum. Others to row 17. Others still to the moment a single human diplomat walked into the council's hall and left without firing a shot, yet carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders. But those who served under Kalen Voss knew the truth. Wars are not always won with weapons. Sometimes they are won with restraint sharp enough to cut.